This week in games, 2023 continues to be a dark year for the video game industry. Let's talk about it. This is the Two Penny Gamescast. What's poppin', players? Welcome back to the Two Penny Gamescast, episode 179. I am your host, Tavin Bothel, here with my good friend and co-host. Say hello to the people, Connor Elliott.
Hello and Merry Christmas. At least it would have been
Christmas.
It would have been Christmas by the time you're hearing this.
Of course.
It's not yet.
As you know, ladies and gentlemen, this show comes out every Tuesday at 8 a.m. Central Time. But Christmas was yesterday. We did it. Connor, did you have a Merry Christmas?
Yes, I did have a Merry Christmas that I'm about to have.
We are recording this a little earlier than normal so that we can enjoy our holiday and not have to worry about all of the production of the podcast. But thank you so much for spending your holidays with us, ladies and gentlemen. And I as well will have or have had quite a Merry Christmas. My parents who live in Chicago, my dad and my stepmom, came down to see us. So I just got off of a hearty lunch with them. And boy, man, let me tell you what, heavy lunches just make you sluggish for the rest of the day. I'll tell you what, I need to go lighter on my lunches for sure.
That's why you're taking a nap, wasting my time. Making me abide by your schedule. It's so selfish.
I know. I'm selfish. But ladies and gentlemen, not only am I selfish, but I am your host for this here show. This is the Two Penny Gamescast, where each week, me and Connor sit down and we give you the new news you need to know concerning the video game industry. We each come to you with two topics, two pennies, if you will, and we give you our 2 cents on them. Remember, you can catch the show every Tuesday at 8 a.m. Central Time, youtube.com/@2pennygames, and mainstream podcast services of your choice. This is the last news week of the year. Next week, we are diving headfirst into our top 10 games of the year, alongside our fantasy draft picks. That's right, Fantasy Critic is coming back for next year. That will be on not this upcoming Saturday, but the one after that, I believe, is our Fantasy Critic draft. So make sure you make sure you subscribe and watch out for that. Also, on the channel is my audition for Kinda Funny's P.S. I Love You XOXO. Make sure you give that a view, a like, share it with the folks over at Kinda Funny, because they've got an empty spot over at the P.S. I Love You podcast, and I'd like to fill it. Or at least make a guest appearance. That would be really cool. So make sure you guys head over to the channel and give that a lot of love so that the noise can be made on that. Connor, let's get right into it, my friend. We got a lot of news to cover this week, and not all of it is cheery, but we're going to do our best to kind of see the bright side in all of this. First topic of the day, my first penny. Sony reportedly pressured its studios to make big cuts amid increasing development costs. This is an IGN article from Wesley Yinpool. And as a little bit of a preamble here, this is off of the back of a major cyberware attack on Insomniac games that happened earlier this last week. And though there is a lot of interesting information that is out there for Insomniac, and including their game slate for pretty much the next decade. You can kind of see all of that out online, and a bunch of early footage for Wolverine. We don't feel like that's really news. It's kind of just like an early look at what could be. Of course, it's all out there, so we're not going to pretend like we haven't seen it. And so, we know things like a supposed Venom spinoff game, an X-Men game later down the line, more Ratchet and Clank to come. All of that's exciting. We're excited to see what those turn into. But of course, any or none of it could happen in the future. We don't know. These things, move around a lot in the video game industry, as we have seen this last year. So we want to talk more about the sort of the human element, or the impact that these hacks actually have, and the insight that they actually provide. Of course, there is a bunch of personal information that got leaked as well. Fuck you to the hackers who did that. They ransomed this information for, I believe it's 50 Bitcoin, around $2 million. And Insomniac said no, so they posted pretty much all of it online and sold a percentage of it as well. So there's a lot of personal information out there. There's, a lot of stuff on Wolverine and of course the game slate that I already talked about. But again, what's the news there? That Insomniac's making more games. Okay, cool. Anybody could have guessed that, and so that's exciting, but that's not what's important, and that's not what's newsworthy in our opinions. Of course, you can go and find all of that news out there. Sources like IGN here, it's their job to report on that type of stuff. So you can find all of that information out there. But we want to talk more about the actual impact on the industry it has. Connor, did all that make sense the way I said it?
That all made sense. I didn't even know about the leaks until you told me about them just now because it's so irrelevant. It really is. Games surprisingly are made, and they're made with technology, and then that's what we've been seeing. So it's like, yeah, games are in production, whatever. It's not really that big a deal. These other things, these other elements of the story that came out, are definitely far more newsworthy due to the impact it has. So
yes,
let's go for it.
So jumping back over to IGN here. I'm going to skip a little bit into their article here, and where it says, as reported by Kotaku, the files also contain meeting notes that claim, quote, there will be one studio closure at PlayStation Studios. It is currently unclear if this claim remains valid. Sony and Insomniac are yet to comment. Elsewhere, files show Insomniac was under pressure to make budget cuts, with 50 to 75 layoffs earmarked for the studio. Insomniac staff reportedly discussed how to, quote, remove 50 to 75 people strategically as requested by Sony, with the best option supposedly to cut deeply into the Wolverine and Spider-Man 3 teams and replacing staff with team members from the unannounced new Ratchet & Clank game and a new unannounced IP. According to the leaked documents, Sony has called on staff cuts across its first-party studios. Officially, we know of a number of layoffs at PlayStation Studios, including a wave of redundancies at Dreams developer Media Molecule, significant cuts at Destiny developer Bungie, and layoffs at The Last of Us developer Naughty Dog. Meanwhile, the documents reveal internal concern at the growing development costs of Insomniac games. According to Kotaku's report on the breach, Spider-Man 2 development costs ran $30 million over its original $270 million, and ultimately needs to sell 7.2 million units to break even. Spider-Man 2 was able to sell more than 5 million units in its first 11 days after release. The leaked documents show the increasingly precarious nature of AAA video game production, which some experts have called unsustainable. And Insomniac is not alone in spending hundreds of millions of dollars on individual titles. In June, documents released as part of the Xbox Federal Trade Commission lawsuit revealed that The Last of Us Part 2 and Horizon Forbidden West each cost more than $200 million to develop. According to the documents, The Last of Us Part 2 cost $220 million, with a peak headcount of 200 full-time employees. Guerrilla Games' Horizon Forbidden West, meanwhile, cost $212 million to develop and utilized more than 300 developers. Insomniac reportedly stressed the need to keep the budget for future AAA games at $350 or less in a slide quoted in Kotaku's report. They must mean $350 million, less than $350 million. With such huge costs associated with the creation of blockbuster video games, anything less than equally huge sales can be catastrophic. Sony announced Spider-Man 2 is the fastest-selling PlayStation Studios game over a 24-hour period, after it sold 2.5 million copies in a day. But now, clear that these type of games need to sell in the tens of millions in order to provide a significant return on investment.
Go
ahead.
I was going to say that we had a story last week of The Last of Us studio, Naughty Dog, shutting down a studio due to the fact that they spent a lot of time and manpower making a game that they ultimately had to cancel. And that was kind of... I feel like we're going to see a lot more of this coming in the future with these big studios that spend a lot of money on their games, have just some small thing go wrong with it that causes them to, possibly have to lay people off. Hopefully we don't end up seeing that. But as we've seen this past whole year, we have games that sell exceptionally well, and then all of a sudden we still hear these stories of layoffs, despite how much money these companies are apparently making. So this is just the kind of the reverberating effects of basically spending all this money just to make a single game after how many years? Is the common time it takes to make a game 5 years, 6 years?
Five is the usual amount now.
Yes. Only going up, seeing as how they spent more than they originally planned to. It's pretty worthwhile to say that whatever they make next, whether it's a Spider-Man DLC, whether it's another Spider-Man game, or obviously continuing with the slate they've already been set on, as the leaks have shown. But ultimately, it's there needs to be a change in how these games are made. We can't just keep doing this, because we're just going to keep continuing the problem. No one's going to do anything to fix it, and we're going to see even more stories of these layoffs or potential layoffs happening. And it just seems like a very, not dystopian, but dour look at the games industry. The more the weeks go on, we just get worse and worse stories like this one. And I'm just pretty fearful for what's going to happen when all of this comes crumbling down, because it really does seem like it's an eventuality at this point.
It feels like there's an inevitable video game industry crash that is set to happen. The dominoes have already been put in place for it, is what it feels like. The thing that confuses me is doing a quick Google search, how much Marvel Spider-Man, the first one, sold. I'm seeing figures of 2018 and Miles Morales both sold 33 million copies globally. So just doing some quick math on the calculator, that's nearly $2 billion, excuse me. It's nearly $2 billion. So you have to sit here and you go, okay, well, 200 million, you can cut that up a couple of different ways. That should fund the next couple of projects going forward and still have a chunk of change left over for everyone's pockets. So where does all this money go? It just seems that, like, the cure, well, maybe not the cure, but a huge thing that would help this industry so much is for these development studios to unionize, and so that we can keep some of these inflated corporate paychecks kind of keep those down a little bit, so that we can secure more jobs. Things like becoming a first-party studio to a huge, massive publisher like Sony should come with job security. But now we're looking at 50 to 75 people being laid off across the board at every studio under PlayStation's wing. That's ridiculous. That shouldn't need to happen. Now, granted, the argument is probably, well, without these acquirements, without being acquired by a publisher like this, maybe some of these studios would close entirely, and it wouldn't just be 50 to 75 people being laid off. It would be an entire studio going under, which would suck. I'd hate that for the talent underneath PlayStation Studios, but at the same time, this doesn't seem like much better either, especially in a year where reportedly, I'm seeing numbers of developer layoffs in the tens of thousands at this rate. And it just keeps coming, and it just seems like there's going to be more coming. We got a story coming on later in the show that hey, more is going to come. It's going to happen more and more. And you see these huge publishers like Embracer make these big bets and risk everybody's lives, and thousands of developers are being left holding the short end of the stick. And it's really quite disgusting as we see these CEOs and stuff making millions a year and millions in bonuses every year, and we never see them seem to cut their stuff down. And then it just seems to be a uniquely Western issue also, because you look over across the other side of the pond over at Nintendo and what they're doing. I understand Sony's a Japanese company, but PlayStation Studios is heralded it's heralded in Japan, but there's a lot going on in the States as well. With not Sid Schumann, who's the fucking head of the studios, who's bouncing, who's Herman Holst. Herman Holst jumping down, right? Is that the right name?
I believe it is.
Am I getting them confused? Anyways, but we look at how Nintendo runs its business, and their CEOs are not afraid to cut their own paychecks to save jobs. Nintendo, for all the weird decisions that they make business-wise and just industry-focused-wise, like, it doesn't make a lot of sense, a lot of the choices they do make, but they seem to just kind of be sitting pretty and strategically being able to release their games in a way that it would profit them the most. I heard stories of, they sat on Metroid Prime Remaster for years. Like, they had that. It was ready. and they just sat on it until it was time to go. The Princess Peach game coming out early next year, reportedly they've been sitting on for a while. They gave Tears of the Kingdom an extra year of development just to make sure it hit right when it was time to actually come out. Why can they do it so well, but all these other publishers and studios can't? And then you look at CEO paychecks, and there's a vast difference between the two. And it's just really a thing of like, man, these smaller developers don't have the rights that they need, the security that they need, the influence in their business that they need. You know, you're dealing with creatives, not business people. And business people are taking advantage of this and making millions of dollars off of the hard work of all of these developers. And they're being left forced to find a new job, not knowing how they're going to pay their rent, or being forced to move their family cross country from either like New York to LA or to another country entirely in order to get their new career started because they lost their job at XYZ studio. It's really sickening to see all this happening. And it's like, man, this cannot continue. We need to find a better route. And now you look at PlayStation and what they've clearly had planned for the future. Something like a dozen games were planned to have to be live service games of service games, and it seems like now they're cutting that back down to 6. And it's just like, dude, you didn't even get one out and your plan failed. Like, Last of Us should have been an easy win and you messed it up. And so now we just have to sit here and go, what are you doing? Do I personally like big budget games like this with high fidelity and crazy graphics and sound effects and super long run times and stuff? Yeah, sure. But you can go back to episode 1 of this show where both me and Connor sat here and said, hey, Last of Us 2 is a phenomenally made game. We had different opinions on sort of the narrative and the things that happened inside the game. But in terms of the technical aspects of the game, it was phenomenal. But we both said it feels too long. Why do we need 20 hours of The Last of Us Part 2? Do we need that? Or can we shrink that down to 10 to 15 maybe and save some of this budget and get these games out maybe a little faster? Maybe there's not so much blood, sweat, and tears put into every title, and then maybe you have a little bit of change at the end of the day, Sony, to where if another Days Gone happens, you don't have to close a studio.
You know, you brought up an interesting point when you compared, the state that Nintendo is in. Obviously, the paychecks or the lack of paycheck cuts that the big guys of these companies take over here in the more Western studios, whenever their game studio is doing bad, they obviously just opt to lay off their workers instead of taking the hit themselves. While Nintendo doesn't, partake in that kind of practice, what they do, which they've been criticized for from the game perspective many times, is the lack of advanced hardware, the Switch being their mainstay console. The games that come out onto that are technically a lot less high fidelity than a lot of these ones that we've been talking about, like Spider-Man, like Last of Us. And I feel like them being forced to make those kinds of smaller games ends up them, being able to save money on the development side of things because they're not trying to use all this brand new technology to build these wide sweeping open world games that are extremely highly graphical and just look extremely nice. Like, I just played Spider-Man before recording this, but there's tons and tons of things I just zip on by and I have no interest in doing it. And I'm curious as to how much time was spent doing that kind of stuff when they could have just focused on a more mainline story and doing some of the crime solving around the area. I feel like if you narrow down your vision, you don't have to go, and you don't go so grand with every single game you make. That's an avenue that you can take to just not be dealing with these problems. Nintendo is a good example of doing it right versus obviously doing it wrong, since we're seeing this collapse coming from what I would say a mile away. But I don't think that there's really going to be much of a course correction by these studios. I think they're just going to keep on making slight alterations. I mean, look at something like Suicide Squad. It got released. It was this big, open world game. It looked not graphically all that well, but it didn't look bad. Clearly, a lot of work was put into the world itself, and people were still just like, well, this gameplay looks kind of lame, so what are we going to do about it? And they said, oh, we'll push it back a couple months to fine-tune it. But from what we saw, there's nothing that they can really do to substantially change the game that we saw on release date. So, with that kind of mentality with how they deal with their games, I just don't think they're even trying to solve the problem because they're raking in money at the end of the day. They just cut these things, they cut these jobs, they close these studios or threaten to close these studios because that just is way more second nature to them than taking the hit themselves. And I just it just becomes very I've become very pessimistic when it comes to talking about these stories. It's not getting better at all. It's just getting worse, and nothing's really being done about it.
And it's frustrating to see this being leveled at Insomniac, who it sucks that their year had to end like this, and now we see all of these like dirty things that are happening behind the scenes as well. And then after them, releasing such a landmark title with Spider-Man 2, they should be celebrating right now. And now they have to put the pieces back together as they figure out, all of the damage that they're suffering from this in the middle of the holidays. They're supposed to be on break right now. Insomniac, closes down their studio the last couple weeks of the year, 2 weeks of the year or whatever, and they come back fresh the next year. And it sucks that now they have to sit here and take this, but it's just like. I mean, a studio that is prolific, a studio that puts out high quality games, very high quality games, and a studio that right now seems to be carrying PlayStation Studios on its back, is now forced to suffer consequences in these things. And there was conversation when Spider-Man 2 got released that it's too short, that it's not long enough. And realistically, the story runs at about the same length of runtime as the first game. Some of the side content might be a little smaller than the first game, like a little bit, like a couple of hours difference. But like also like just look at how much more you can do in Spider-Man 2 as opposed to Spider-Man 1. Like their focus is on quality, not quantity here. And you just have to sit back and wonder of like, okay, they had the choice to give us more filler to pad out that runtime. They had the choice to do that, and they chose not to. And now they have to continue choosing not to do that because they're not feeling supported by their publisher that just acquired them. What was the point of this acquisition if a few years down the line we have to let some of our family go because business wasn't done as intelligently as it probably should have been.
Short-term gain is my estimation of why that decision was made.
It's just frustrating. And then now, Connor, we move on to topic number 2 of the day, your first penny. And we have Insomniac's actual response here from the hacks. If you'll go ahead and take it away here, buddy.
Of course, they had to respond somehow. It's pretty big news for them. We got this, like you said, on X, formerly known as Twitter. Thank you for the outpouring of compassion and unwavering support. It's deeply appreciated. We're both saddened and angered about the recent criminal cyber attack on our studio and the emotional toll it's taken on our dev team. We have focused inwardly for the last several days to support each other. We are aware that the stolen data includes personal information belonging to our employees, former employees, and independent contractors. It also includes early development details about Marvel's Wolverine for PlayStation 5. We continue working quickly to determine what data was impacted. This experience has been extremely distressing for us. We want everyone to enjoy the games we develop as intended and as our players deserve. However, like Logan, Insomniac is resilient. Marvel's Wolverine continues as planned. The game is in early production and will no doubt greatly evolve throughout development, as do all our plans. While we appreciate everyone's enthusiasm, we will share official information about Marvel's Wolverine when the time is right. On behalf of everyone at Insomniac, thank you for your ongoing support during this challenging time, Insomniac Games. So, the thing that I was thinking when I was reading this, right, was why would you... Kind of a weird thing to bring up Logan during all of that. I don't know, just like you're dealing with the information of employees that, as it said at the beginning, are getting their own personal data leaked, which could lead to all sorts of problems.
It's just a fun little thing. They happen to be working on that on Wolverine right now, so they're just saying, hey, we're muscling through this. We're gonna be okay.
Well,
they
will. We obviously just covered a bunch of the more topics on studio closures and layoffs and whatnot, but we didn't really touch more on, like I said, the people getting their information leaked, which is, potentially the most dangerous thing, because whereas someone could just lose their job, this could lead to some, I guess, crazy person doing something crazy. Who knows what the times we live in nowadays? But ultimately, all of this stuff, it's the leaks for the game specifically, they're bound to change. So all of it's pretty much, irrelevant. No one's going to be thinking about this kind of stuff when the actual full gameplay is shown, because you know games change as they go through development, and this is going to be no exception. It really is just the mentality of cyber terrorists, if that's the correct term to use. I'll just go with it for now, because they clearly just have no care for anybody else, and they invest in Bitcoin. They're pretty fucking stupid.
Well, it's the idea that they can, because Bitcoin can't be traced on what you're doing with it. So it's the idea that, hey, give us this in this currency form, and then we can cash it out in whatever currency form we want or need, so that they can't be found, type thing.
Maybe they are smarter than me, then.
We never claim to be smart men, Connor. Just not
shitty.
Just not shitty men. We're definitely not shitty men. Yeah, I mean, my heart really does go out for Insomniac, man. They as I said before, they really should just be celebrating at this point. They put out a fantastic game. They were nominated for a bunch of awards. And depending on the award show, maybe they got some, maybe they didn't. It sucks that of course the Keeleys, didn't get them anything, but that doesn't matter at the end of the day. They produced a phenomenal game, and there's a lot of love in the game, and I'm excited to see what comes from it later on down the line. Things like New Game Plus, which is supposed to come out early next year. All the new suits that they're inevitably going to add to the game, like they did with the first game, and any DLC or expand-alone properties. It looks like we're getting a Venom game, which is exciting. So this should be a time where we get to praise and celebrate, and they get to relax, and they've made it to the other end of the tunnel, and then so they should be able to take a break for a little bit, and then now they have to deal with all this nonsense, and it really sucks. And specifically the one line that's in its own little paragraph here in their statement: this experience has been extremely distressing for us. It hurts to hear that from them. It's like, fuck, man, that sucks. That this is what you got to worry about in the middle of the holidays. You've sent everybody home, and then now you got to call them all back and be like, hey, man, this happened. Sorry, we're gonna figure it out for you. This, that, and the third. Because a lot of personal information is out there, man. My dad's social security number got stolen from him years ago, and so now every year he has to do a check-in with the government to be like, hey, this is me. This is what I've done. This is this is everything that I'm involved with, and all these things. Like, it's a huge hassle, and that happened years ago. And it was just one guy at one time just fell victim to a quick thievery or whatever. So now I can't imagine a studio with hundreds of people and everything that could be released, whether it's like personal documents, social security numbers, passports, medical bills maybe, or insurance information and stuff like that. Like, that's a lot of really sensitive stuff that should really just be between an individual person and their employer when necessary. So to hear that, you can just kind of Google a motherfucker and find out everything about them, that sucks, man. And it's from a team that is just so talented and high quality, and they put in a lot of work. And regardless of how you feel about an Insomniac game, whether it's your type of game or not, you always can just feel the hard work that goes into them all the time. It just feels like Insomniac games have a lot of heart in them, whether it's Ratchet and Clank, whether it's Spider-Man, whether it's what's the one from Xbox that I have on the tip of my tongue years ago. Sunset Overdrive, anything like that. You feel the heart being poured into all of their games, and it sucks that now that we have to see this for them.
Let's hope Rizida, as the hacker group is called, doesn't have anything else on them. Hopefully this was just all their cards, and they showed them, and we won't hear about them at least for a while. Unfortunately, with these hacker groups, you never know if it's just going to be a one-time thing or if they're going to continue their reign on other studios. Because who knows how they got this information, whether they have somebody on the inside or they just were able to use their skills to get into it from the outside. Regardless of their methods, not a good group to have running around.
Definitely. And I would say the best call to make is the one that Insomniac made, and it was to not give in to the demands of these terrorists and so forth. And it's just to be like, all right, hey man, yeah, this happened, this sucks. Hopefully they warned everybody that they said, hey, it looks like this is gonna happen, guys. So like we're gonna have to see what exactly they all have. But
Yeah.
I mean, I can't even imagine like what the proper way to handle this must have been like. Like all of your business plans for the next decade are out there now. How do you even do that? Especially when you're dealing with contracts and NDAs from Marvel and Disney and all of that. Like, they're dealing with some hefty IPs and there's a lot of money and a lot of people who keep these things under wraps. So that really, really sucks.
They did deal with it the best though, because I mean, at the end of the day, if you were to give them the money, there's nothing to say that they wouldn't have just leaked it anyway. They had all the power in that situation.
Or asked for more or
Yeah.
done something more drastic or something like that. And then now they have $2 million, on their name, which sucks. Moving on to topic number 3 here, Connor. My second penny of the day, and not necessarily a better thing either, though the headline might dissuade you in that. China to ban some monetization and engagement tactics in games. This is from gamesindustry.biz by Brendan Sinclair. China announced a series of planned restrictions on video game monetization and engagement tactics, according to Reuters. The National Press and Publication Administrations released new draft rules that will ban a swath of common mechanics in games, including daily login rewards, bonuses for first-time spenders, and incentives to spend repeatedly on a game. Publishers will also be prohibited from offering loot boxes to minors or allowing for in-game items to be auctioned or used as speculative assets. Games will need to impose spending limits on players, while publishers will be required to run all their servers for Chinese games in China. And then as a quick update, loot box researcher Leon Zhao has also announced that one of the new recruitments has also noted that one of the new requirements is that games with loot boxes must allow users to purchase the specific item they want directly as well. Additionally, should a game shut down, unspent currency must be refunded to players in real money at the rate it was originally purchased at. In one possible concession to the games industry, regulators would also need to rule on game approvals within 60 days of submission. A lengthy game approval process for new releases has been an issue in China for several years. For 9 months of 2021 and 2022, there was a complete freeze on approvals, no doubt contributing to the Chinese games industry seeing decreasing consumer spending on games last year for the first time in 2 decades. Reuters noted that Tencent shares dropped as much as 16%, and NetEase shares were down up to 25% after the rules were released. Quote, "It's not necessarily the regulation itself, it's the policy risk that's too high," Stephen Luong, executive director of institutional sales at broker UOB K Hyun, in Hong Kong. I'm sorry for mispronouncing all of these names. I'm a white American man. I apologize. In Hong Kong, told Reuters, quote, people had thought this kind of risk should have been over and had started to look at fundamentals again. It hurts confidence a lot. China has imposed restrictions on the games industry repeatedly in recent years, sharply limiting minors' playtime, banning live streaming for those under 16, and imposing stricter rules around the depictions of religion and gender. Now, on its face, I don't personally have any issues with some of the restrictions that are happening here. The problem is when you get into that last bit, when you talk about Tencent shares, NetEase shares, and you think about how much investment those two companies have in every studio around the world. What market share they have in a lot of different in a lot of different studios and publishers worldwide. Tencent is the biggest, I think, video game publisher in the world, I think. It's certainly like up there around, I'm pretty sure it's bigger than PlayStation, for sure. And they have a lot of sway in a lot of different worldwide publishers. So
Tencent is the number one.
Yeah, for Tencent to face these restrictions, to potentially lose out on all this revenue, for all of these shares to drop in value like this, it looks like 2024 is going to be a repeat of 2023 when it comes to video game layoffs and job security in this industry. This industry continues to be volatile, and it continues to hurtle down a road that seems destined to arrive at destruction. And it's just, man, I don't know what the solution is for it.
The worst part about you bringing that up, Tavin, is that could be used as a way to just write off all of the other issues that are connected with the collapsing video game market and put it all on the blame of China fucking over Tencent. It kind of creates a convenient scapegoat, and it's a scapegoat that's created by the Chinese government, who, even though you, like you said, you can point out some good things that their decisions have wrought, such as preventing people from doing in-game purchases, because clearly that is people say it's predatory towards not only people in general and gamers in general, but children who play those games. So on like I said, on its face, it seems like, okay, that's good. It's all just because China has this attitude towards games where anything that is slightly involved on the player part, whether it's buying things, daily logins, is construed as gambling or messing with the youth, because we have already covered in the past how they've limited how many games, how much time you can play games if you're under 18. And it's like a ridiculous amount, a ridiculously low amount.
I want to say it's in single digit hours a day or
yeah,
something.
It's like 1 hour or something like that. And it's just, it's all a method of controlling the population and reacting to something that you really don't know all that much about, seeing as how the people who make these decisions are old men. And as we've always seen, when it comes to new technology, they're the ones who are behind everybody else, which sometimes is a really, really bad thing. Sometimes it's pretty negligible. Here's one of an example of the former, because they just lash out at the gaming industry. It's kind of just their scapegoat for their own problems as well. It's, and unfortunately, there's not really much people can do because it's the Chinese government. It's like if the U.S. government decided to do something, there's not many people that can come in and say, well, actually, we shouldn't do that, and I'm going to fight you on that and win. It just doesn't happen.
Yeah. And again, just to add a little bit of nuance to the conversation, I mean, these are restrictions that we talk about all the time, about how predatory loot boxes are, how predatory all these microtransactions are, how we talk about how, streaming and being online and all of that is bad for your health and your mental health and physical health and all of these things. And, ideally limitations on these things could potentially in a world be what we would want to solve some of these issues that we have. It's just the fact that, in an industry that is already hurtling towards collapse, one of its biggest players being the Chinese government, and the Chinese people now have to deal with all of these different things. And it's almost certainly going to result in, more layoffs, more studio closures, because the revenue is drying up here. And all of that's really, really concerning. Now, is it a little bit of like, hey, maybe we're taking our medicine here and it sucks, but we just kind of have to brunt force our way through it so that maybe we can get to the other side and have a happier situation years later? Maybe, but in the moment, this sucks. It's scary. And I would understand if someone saw all this news that we've already covered today, all the other headlines that have been covered for the last year plus, really basically ever since the pandemic started, it feels like everything has been super volatile in this industry. I would totally understand if up and coming developers or up and coming people who want to work in this industry go, it's just not worth it. Like, I can't do that because I want security. I want to be able to start a family. I want to be able to provide for my family and things like this. And I would totally understand if they're like, hey, it's my dream to work for these companies and develop this art, but it doesn't make feasible sense to do it. And that's what really sucks is all the lost art and culture and all the lost joy in it all is really what we're being robbed of here, and that's unfortunate. Connor, it's been a heavy series of news stories all week this week, and now we are arriving at something a little more bittersweet and hopefully a little more positive by the end of the day. This is our final topic of the day in your final penny. Take it away, my friend.
We got an article from The Verge here, from Tom Warren and Ash Parrish. Microsoft announces more Xbox leadership changes as Activision's Bobby Kotick departs. Activision Blizzard CEO Bobby Kotick is stepping down officially December 29th. Microsoft has not appointed a direct replacement and has instead has rolled the suite of Activision Blizzard executives, including Blizzard President Mike Ybarra, Activision Publishing President Rob Kodish, and Activision Blizzard Vice Chair Thomas Tipple under Microsoft's Game Content and Studio President Matt Booty. Kotick's departure comes just 2 months after some big Xbox leadership changes that saw Sarah Bond promoted to Xbox president, leading all Xbox platform and hardware work, and Max Booty promoted to president of game content and studios, including overseeing Bethesda and ZeniMax Studios. Now Booty is getting even more responsibilities with Bethesda, Activision Blizzard, and Xbox Game Studios all under his watch. Microsoft is largely keeping the leadership team of Activision Blizzard in place, with some executive-level exceptions. Activision Blizzard Chief Communications Officer Lulu Mercerve will leave the company at the end of January. Humam Sakini, Vice Chairman Blizzard and King, will also depart at the end of December. A number of Activision Blizzard executives will depart in March too. Brian Bulatau, Chief Administrative Officer, Julie Hodges, Chief People Officer, Armin Zerza, Chief Financial Officer, and Grant Dixon, Chief Legal Officer, are all reporting to their Microsoft Gaming equivalents, while Thomas Tipple, Vice Chairman Activision Blizzard, is reporting to Max Booty for now. He will depart Microsoft in March alongside other Activision Blizzard executives. Quote, Thomas, Brian, Julie, Grant, and Armin will continue to help us with the transition through March 2024, says Xbox Chief Phil Spencer in an internal memo obtained by The Verge. Additionally, a memo from Max Booty announced some of the changes taking place at ZeniMax and Bethesda, including that Jill Braff has been named the new head of these studios. Braff worked on the integration team with ZeniMax, and Bethesda joined Xbox back in 2021 and will lead the studio's development teams. Microsoft continues to integrate Activision Blizzard into its expanded Microsoft gaming business, and it's clear Max Booty is now taking more responsibility than ever before. Xbox fans are now waiting to hear from Microsoft on its plans to add Activision Blizzard games to Xbox Game Pass. Spencer previously blamed the deal's long regulatory process for not having a back catalog of Activision Blizzard's games available on Game Pass, warning we'd have to wait until 2024 for news on game additions. Activision Blizzard also revealed on X, formerly Twitter, ahead of the Microsoft deal closing, that Modern Warfare 3 and Diablo 4 both won't be coming to Xbox Game Pass this year. Here's Spencer's full internal memo. Fuck that. So basically, a bunch of people are leaving, and it's been a long time coming. We've heard of this deal since we started this podcast. It was hampered by the CMA, by the who's the board over here, the regulations board, the fucking the Stocks and Trades Commission board.
Oh, FTC,
yes, yeah. So a lot of things happened. Obviously, during this time, we also got the massive report of sexual harassment going on at what was then just Blizzard Activision, without being under the Microsoft label, and knowledge that some of these executives knew about it and just kind of ignored it, Bobby Kotick being chief among them. This is not a impact from that. It is clear just now that they purchased it, the intention at the beginning when they were selling it was that a lot of Activision Blizzard people were going to be heading out with a bunch of money, and that is what we're seeing take place. So, it's as you said, it's bittersweet. We're finally getting the scum, or the potential scum at least, out of this company, so maybe we won't see any more of these stories of harassment go on in the future. Which, admittedly, even if they hadn't been bought by Microsoft due to the impact it had on them from a PR perspective, they probably wouldn't have had these issues once again, but it's better to be safe than sorry, because clearly they let it fester to begin with. And, unfortunately, if they go to a new company, these executives, there's nothing that says they won't be doing the same exact things or be guilty of the same exact things if there is problems at that company. So it's ultimately just, brighter future so we can leave behind the dark past of Activision Blizzard.
No, yeah, indeed. I mean, I'm with you pretty much that whole way. I mean, most of these executives, I imagine their name is probably pretty poisoned by their work over at Activision Blizzard and the allegations and so forth, and the troublesome workforce culture that took place there. And this is sort of the payoff that we've kind of been waiting for this whole time during this whole acquisition fiasco is, hey man, let's get some of these leaders who aren't fit to lead out of here. And I mean, you just look at Activision Blizzard from over the last decade, really, and what has happened to these companies over the course of the leadership of folks like Bobby Kotick, and you just go, yeah, no, I wouldn't want Bobby Kotick to run my shit either. Now, I'm sure most of these guys will find jobs again and will have high forming positions or whatever, and they're probably walking away with a cool chunk of change for all of this. But the important part is that we can start sort of rebuilding from here, and we can start, reforming these workforce cultures and hopefully getting them under a nicer umbrella. Which, to my knowledge, Microsoft Studios have not had nearly as much contention in their workforce as Activision Blizzard has had. So hopefully, under this new leadership, we can kind of clean this up a little bit, get it nice and running smoothly. My concern with this is Content and Studios president Matt Booty, who's great. He's awesome. I've seen his name for years and years and years. He's been doing a lot of great work over at Xbox for many years. But now going under or being in charge of Xbox game studios, first party studios, the Bethesda and ZeniMax, and now Activision Blizzard King. That's a lot of work for Booty. And I hope that it's going to work out in his favor there, and hope he's not, putting too much on his individual plate with this. Hopefully, this will, all run smoothly and have no problems. But you do have to wonder, after releases of games such as Redfall, if putting even more on Matt Booty's plate is the right choice here, or maybe should we bring someone else up to this level and have them work in tandem with Matt Booty here? I don't know. These are conversations that Xbox needs to have behind closed doors. These are not conversations we need to be prior to. But you just look around and you go, well, the problem with Redfall is that Microsoft didn't come in and establish a clear enough vision for Arcane to do. They just kind of let Arcane do whatever they want, and Arcane wasn't sure what they were doing. So it led to a mix match of a title with Redfall, and it reflected with everything else in that. Now, granted, I will say, end of the day period, and sort of just to cap off for Xbox and their year, this I think has been overall a pretty good year for Xbox. We've had a solid number of wins under the Xbox flag. We've had a couple of duds, a couple of that's not great. Most notably when Redfall launched, on top of the European Trade Commission moving to block the Activision Blizzard acquisition. And then we saw that interview with Phil Spencer on Kind of Funny's Xcast, where he kind of just took it and said, yeah, things are rough right now. This is not great. And he put that on himself. And he gained, I think, a lot of respect for from a lot of people, including myself. He already had my respect, but he garnered even more there. I do think Phil Spencer is the right guy to be leading the ship at Xbox, and I think he is surrounding himself with the right people. When you talk about Sarah Bond, when you talk about Matt Booty, these are people who know what they're doing and who want the best for not only the business side of Xbox, but also the personal side of Xbox, the developers, the fans, the gamers, everybody. They want the best thing for everybody around here. And I see, you can see all of the hard work that Xbox has been putting in the last couple of years, and hopefully we keep hoping and praying that it's going to pay off. And this looks to be sort of the first steps in. Okay, now we're established. Now we've got it. Let's go put out some great games. Let's have a great console. Let's do all these great things. And hopefully the worst days of Xbox are behind us now.
Or they're in the future, and then this investment is the first nail in the coffin. Who knows?
Who knows?
They can go either way. The other thing I'll add is, this obviously we're hearing of a couple of the restructurings going on at Microsoft, Activision, and Microsoft as a whole. I think we're going to see it more in the future. Max Booty is just taking on those positions until
Matt Booty. Max like 7 times. It's
Max. It's so similar.
You read the story, Connor. You saw the spellings.
If you take the T and you kind of like turn it and shorten one of the sticks, you get an X. So, I mean, ultimately, he'll probably get replaced by somebody on some of those positions as time goes on. Because that is a lot on one person's plate.
It's a lot. It's a lot. And don't get me wrong, I'm not putting Redfall on Matt Booty's shoulders at all. Like, I'm not. I think that was just a hiccup in figuring out how to work together between Bethesda Game Studios and Xbox Game Studios. I think it was just like a bit of okay, we need to be a little more hands-on here. I can certainly guarantee you that going forward, games like, I guess Avowed is not Bethesda, but future Bethesda games, whether it be Blade, whether it be Indiana Jones or whatever Bethesda game software themselves has coming down the pipeline with Elder Scrolls 6 or whatever. I imagine Xbox is going to be much more hands-on it and much more focused on what's happening at their internal studio. So yeah, I'm hoping for the best and expecting them to land somewhere in the middle. Ladies and gentlemen, that is it for your Two Penny Gamescast this week. A decently sized one, not overly long this week, but a lot of great stuff to talk about and a lot of things to chew on in the holiday season. Now, make sure you do come back next week as we will be premiering our Two Penny Games top 10 games of the year. Phil will be joining us. It'll be me, Connor, Phil. We're going to be breaking it all down, giving you our individual top 10s and then our collective top 10s, much like we did last year, and I'm very, very excited to see all of that. Make sure you do subscribe and watch out for changes happening to the channel. We are hoping that 2024 is going to be a big year for us in the coming months, so make sure you keep an eye out for all of the cool stuff that we could or could not be putting out. Who knows? And until next time, have a great time. Connor, say goodbye to the people.
Goodbye and Merry Christmas, Happy Holidays, and whatnot.
Merry Christmas.